Now that we're nearing the final builds of Android Q, I think it's probably time that we take a final look at the way that Google are going to handle navigation gestures for this release. Initially, I only had my original Google Pixel enrolled in the beta, but we've gone through several beta releases since then, and the navigation system is honestly so good now that I feel comfortable enrolling my main device in it, and that's what I've done. I think I'm probably best off comparing the new navigation system to the old 2 and 3 button navigation systems in order to show you exactly what's new and what's changed. I think that's probably the easiest way to tackle this. It's worth noting that if you're not up or keen on the new navigation system that Google are going to use for Android Q, you can still go back and you can use either the 2 or the 3 button navigation systems. There's a gesture menu in your settings and you can switch between all 3 as you wish. One of the biggest things that Google have improved upon with this release is the amount of screen real estate that the navigation bar takes up. It used to take up a decent chunk of your screen. It was always a black or a white bar at the bottom of your screen with the buttons in it. Now it's just a thin line that goes across the bottom and it takes up far less room on your screen, which means we might actually finally be able to make use of the massive screens that we are carrying around with us on a daily basis. One other thing that's worth noting is that a lot of applications are adopting a transparent system where the navigation bar, there's no black or white bar at the bottom of your screen at all anymore. The little white line that indicates that you can swipe up to go home or do any of the other gestures is just visible and it just floats on top of the application window, so it doesn't take up any more room, and I really like that. At the moment it's first-party applications that have it really, so Google Photos has just added it, the official Google Dialer and Android Messages, they all have that, but third-party applications will be a good bit slower updating. Jumping from one app to another is probably my favourite thing about it. You've got a number of different ways that you can do it, so you can either just swipe in a sort of horizontal direction along the bottom and that just jumps you straight from one app to another really quickly, or if you want a quick preview of your application, you can draw almost a rainbow shape on your screen and it will hop from one application to another, allowing you to get a quick preview of what's on the other application before you switch to it. I really like that you've got 2 different ways of doing it. It feels very fluid and I think it's quite nice to have the flexibility there. Getting back to your home screen is obviously one of the most important things you can do on a phone, and I think this swipe up finally now just feels right. To be honest, I've never really liked tapping a button in order to go home. I used to use, I think it was called Pi Navigation or something like that on my Nexus 4 years and years ago, and even that was a sort of swipe up to get home, and this now finally feels right. It's a really, really nice transition to go home just with a sort of quick swipe up. Speaking of going home, that is now unfortunately the only way that you're going to quickly access your app tray. The days of being able to do a sort of a short swipe to get up into your overview and then a long swipe up in order to get into your app tray from any application, those days are kind of gone now. It's 2 swipes to get up if you're in an application. So you've got to swipe up and hold, which takes you into your overview, and then you've got to swipe up again in order to get into your app tray if you're in an application. That's all different on your home screen. If you're on your home screen, you can just do a long swipe up and it takes you into your app tray. As much as the new back gesture has received quite a lot of flack, I actually find myself quite liking it. My favourite thing about it is probably that it's ambidextrous, so people who are left or right-handed can use it in exactly the same way, and I think that actually works very well. The other thing I really like about it is that you can use it at any height. So say you're lying in bed or wherever, I guess, wherever you like to lie down. You might be holding your phone in a slightly weird orientation, and the new back gesture you can use at any height on the phone, so you can swipe across, at the top of the phone or at the bottom of the phone or in the middle, in fact, and I think that again is quite a useful feature. Something that I think is very core to the way that everyone uses Android is the overview mode or the multitasking mode, and that I think it's probably on its way out. I would have thought the next major release of Android that we see probably won't have it anymore. It just feels like Google are kind of slacking on it. It feels like it's not at the top of their priorities list. In this release, the way that you get up to it is you can either do a sort of swipe up and hold briefly, and the hold is the perfect length. In comparison to the way that iOS handles the swipe up and hold, this is better. This is genuinely a better way of doing it. It's a much shorter delay. But in the same way as you can on iOS, you can go and do a sort of upside down L, so you can swipe and then swipe up and then along like that, and that brings it up even quicker if you want to do that. And it feels relatively polished as a gesture. It's just the overview that I think we will see taken out before all too long. Which I guess brings me round to some of the complaints that I have around the gesture navigation system, some of the things that just don't feel quite finished yet. It's worth noting all of my comments are probably best taken with a pinch of salt. We're still technically in a pre-release phase of the software, so things are likely to change. I wouldn't have thought they're going to change dramatically at this point. We're fairly late in the betas, as I'm sure you're all aware, but there are still things that might alter from what I say. The first of the things that I find really grinds my gears is the new little assistant toggles that you have in the corner. So there's no more holding down on your home button in order to trigger the assistant, which to be honest I always really liked, especially if you've got a phone that you can't squeeze, unlike the Pixels. But they've now replaced this with little toggles in each corner of the phone, which are great. They work really well. The way that you trigger them is it's like going back to your home screen, so you grab hold of a corner and you drag it up like that, and that triggers the Google Assistant. The problem with it is, and I genuinely do find it really irritating, it's the fact that Google shove the Assistant in your face at every possible opportunity. I mean, obviously I understand they've got to make some money somewhere, and using the Assistant is kind of a big deal for Google, but what really irritates me is that every time you open an application, the little toggles in the corner pop up, even though there's absolutely no use for them. As far as I'm concerned, Google can stick it in a sort of how to use the navigation system demo and be done with it there. It doesn't need to pop up every time. This is one of the things that I think will probably change before we see a full release of Android Q. Lastly, I should probably address the hamburger menus, or the lack thereof, and how you access them. With the new back gesture, it's obviously a swipe in from either side, which is really nice, and as I said, I really like the gesture, but the problem is that Android is very, very heavily reliant on swiping over in order to activate a hamburger menu. Now, the problem with that is that Google are trying to fix it, and I say trying there. I can't say I've got a better solution. I wouldn't know how to solve the problem better than Google are doing at the moment, but I don't think this is the solution yet. The way that Google are trying to fix the problem is by swiping in a tiny bit and holding. So you kind of just tap and hold at the edge of your screen basically, and that sort of pulls the hamburger menu out a little bit, but it's so hit and miss that I'm hesitant to call it a solution at the moment. Most of the time when I do it, I either end up going back, just activating the back gesture on that side, or I end up closing the application for whatever reason. It's not brilliant yet. I would have thought before we see a final release of Android Q there will be some improvements made to that. In fact, I think it's a necessity that they make some improvements to that. It's nothing close to perfect yet, it really is not. Which I think fairly smartly brings me around to the end of the video. There's a lot of good to be said for the new navigation system, and I think it's really bringing Android into the 21st century a little bit. It's bringing it up to compete with iOS, OnePlus, and even Huawei's offerings that they have now in terms of gesture navigation. Because it's a first-party implementation, it does feel very smooth. It does feel relatively similar to the way that iOS handles its navigation gestures, which is really nice. I think that they still have the upper hand in navigation gestures as far as I'm concerned, but this is definitely a step in the right direction. As I say, I'm going to be interested to see how it evolves for the final release, but as of now, if you're wanting to jump on to the Android Q beta, I'd say go for it. There are a couple of bugs, but most stuff is working now, even banking applications and Google Pay. That's all working perfectly. So if you're wanting to try it out, I would say go for it. If you've got a second phone lying around like I did with my Google Pixel, I would definitely do it. It's definitely worthy of a second phone, if not your primary phone. So yeah, that is all for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!